Thanks for joining today's webinar with eOne. Presenting today, we have Michelle and Tyler. So a huge thank you to them for being here today. And with that being said, I will hand things off to you, Michelle.
Hey, thanks, Allie. Good afternoon, everyone. We're excited to talk to you. Today, we're going to highlight Popdock for use with Business Central. And today I have with me Tyler Epping. So Tyler's going to provide our demo, and Tyler is our Popdock evangelist. So he lives, breathes, and sleeps Popdock. And I'm Michelle, and I support the TM group, or TMG these days. And you probably know eOne for Smart Connect. Over the years, Smart List Builder, some of our other products. Smart Connect is our application where you're going to move data, but Popdock that we're showing you today is sharing the data. So a couple of quick highlights before Tyler gets started with his demo. What is Popdock? First and foremost, Popdock is an end user query tool. It's going to allow your team to access data in real time, not necessarily in the application that they're working. What sets Popdock apart? We're always real time. So it's not a tool like Power BI or SSRS. There's no data warehouse. Everything that you're going to see in Popdock is real time all the time. And then any data anywhere. So Tyler's going to show you Popdock in a few different applications as he demos today. And I think with that, Tyler, if you're ready.
I'm ready to roll. Thanks, Michelle. All right, let me share my screen here. So yeah, today I'm really going to focus on how when we talk about Popdock interacts with Business Central. I know a lot of the audience here today is either already on Business Central or potentially evaluating that move to Business Central. Just a little bit about eOne. We come from originally the D space, so we made Smart List Builder, Smart Connect, Smart View, and when we created Popdock, we really wanted to make it like the next generation of those products. I'm going to focus on here today how we've kind of given that Smart List and Smart View type functionality in terms of an interface inside of Business Central so that you can access any of your lists, whether that be data from your live BC system or maybe historical data from a Dynamics G system. So we'll start there, and then I'm going to show you a couple of examples where we've actually taken historical data from a Dynamics GP system and are actually displaying it inside of Business Central with Popdock. And then as we wrap up, I'll get into our Popdock web application and just give you kind of a behind the scenes tour of what that looks like inside of a connector and some of the functionality that we bring specifically to Business Central in terms of our query builder tool in Popdock. So to get started here today, as you can see, I have this Popdock tab inside of my BC environment. This is an extension that's on Microsoft's App Source and something that you can install directly into your Business Central environment. And what we have here is what we call a multi-list widget inside of Popdock. And within this widget, we've pre-created about 55 lists that we give you access to out of the box, and they'll connect directly with your Business Central environment. So those of you coming from G and are used to Smart List, some of the groups are going to be similar to some of the basic or standard Smart Lists that you've grown accustomed to. So we have lists in financial, fixed asset lists. We have some purchasing, sales. But then you can also see we've added some other lists from other environments as well. And as we move forward, I'll get into those. But to start, I'm going to just highlight this interface. So this is just a purchase transactions list. It's connecting to this live Business Central system. Really what I want you to get out of this is really the ease of use. Like I said, we've tried to create that Smart List like reporting functionality right in Business Central. And anytime we display a list with Popdock, it's going to be the exact same experience in terms of what users can do with their data, no matter where that list is coming from or no matter where we are displaying the Popdock list, which I'll show you in a little bit. But some of the things that you will be able to do on any list very easily: add additional columns to any list, simply select which ones you want to add. Popdock will requery and bring those additional fields in. You can do things like remove columns as well. You'll notice that they drop in real time. If I hit refresh, it just takes advantage of the full screen. You can do things like rearrange the order of the fields. So if you wanted your document date field at the front of your list, it's just a drag and drop feature. We can also group by any of our fields. So grouping would then, in this case, I'm grouping by all of my vendors. So grouping all of the purchase transactions associated with each vendor. You'll notice that when you do group, it brings in subtotaling by vendor. And then you have the ability to drill down further and see the associated transactions. Now you can take this a step further because you can also subgroup as well. So if I wanted to group by my vendors and then subgroup by my documents, you can see, again, we're giving that subtotaling at each level of grouping, which is pretty powerful. I'm going to jump into filters now. So coming from GP, if that's where you had been previously, you were probably used to the 4 filter limit. That's something that's completely eliminated with Popdock. You can have as many filters as you like, so you can hit that plus button as many times as you want. You can do things like mix your ands with your ors. So just really a lot of power in being able to ask questions of your data. Now, working with a filter, you're probably oftentimes working around some sort of date field. So you can see I have my document date as the field that I'm filtering on here. This second section is all of the operators. We give you a lot of operators just out of the box. If you're working with a date field, you might be filtering with this between operator, filtering on a date range. You can certainly continue to do that, but we also have these compare fields built in as well. These are all just relative date filters. They're all off the current date. So maybe you just wanted to filter your list on last month's transactions or last quarter's transactions. We have that date range already pre-set up so that you don't necessarily have to define it every single time. And then you can use this list really at any time, as it will always go off the current date. Now, once you've applied filters, you'll then have the ability to favorite any one of your lists. So this is going to be similar to Smart List favorites. It'll save any filters you've applied. It'll save any columns that you maybe have added or removed, save the order that you have your columns in so that you can go back and access this list at any time. You don't have to recreate it every single time you want to see it. And then to take it a step further, you can also share those favorites with other users inside of your team or inside of your environment. A couple other things on this interface: exporting. It's very easy to dump any of these lists out to Excel. So if you prefer working with your data in Excel, as you can see, it downloads that list very quickly. It gives you an Excel table to work with. It will bring over all the totaling and subtotaling. It also brings over the formula as well, which is pretty handy. One thing I will also point out is we do have an Excel add-in, our Popdock Excel add-in. What this allows you to do is you can essentially just log into your Popdock account. Any list that you have available to you, you can simply select the connector that list is coming from, select that list, and populate it right into your Excel sheet. So you don't necessarily have to export the list if you don't want to. So just another, I guess, nice feature if you prefer spending your time in Excel. This is a way that you can still access those lists and you don't necessarily have to go through Business Central or export it from another environment. So going back to the list, if you have multiple companies within your Business Central environment, all of our lists are going to be multi-company by default. So as you can see, there's a multi-company drop-down menu. I'm going to list all of your companies. I just selected my EU one. And what will happen is when this list comes back, it's going to populate a new column that will show companies. Here we go. So you see this company column gets populated, and it's basically telling us what company these transactions are coming from. So you'll notice that, the first however many are coming from my US company. If I scroll down even further, you'll then see that I have records coming from my EU company just alongside that. So really nice to be able to bring all that data into one interface. You don't necessarily have to jump between multiple companies within your environment to get at all of your data. Now, the last thing I just want to highlight on this page is what we call details. So coming from GP, if that's where you had been previously, you might be used to go-tos. So we've taken that concept and kind of divided it into two things with Popdock. So one of those is called details. Details allow us to show related information all within the same screen. So you can see that I have this lines detail. And if I click on one of the records, what's going to happen is it's going to now show me the lines that are associated with that document number. Anytime there's some sort of relationship within the data, we can tie all that data together and bring it together into one interface so that you don't necessarily have to jump to multiple lists to get access or to get a kind of comprehensive view of what you're looking for. Now, this example is pulling from two separate lists inside of Business Central, but you also have the ability to show details from disparate systems as well. So if you maybe are using, for example, a CRM system, we commonly see people bring in a detail of like opportunity information that are associated with a customer. And in that case, we'd use some sort of customer ID between the two systems in order to define that relationship. Another example would be like a help desk solution, bringing in ticket information that are associated with a customer. But anytime there's some sort of relationship within the data, we have the ability to tie it all together, bring it all in kind of into the same interface so that you and your users don't necessarily have to jump between multiple applications to get a comprehensive view of your business. So that's what I wanted to highlight on this interface. As we go on, I'm going to show a couple of more lists. And the big thing to point out is, again, no matter where the data is coming from, the experience is going to be the same in terms of what users can do with their data. So anytime we display a Popdock list, this interface and what can be accomplished within the interface is going to be the exact same. So I'm going to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about historical data. So historical data in this case. So if you are coming from Dynamics GP, we have a nice kind of tool as a part of our Popdock plan that essentially is a tool that assists with archiving any data that would be coming from any of your smart lists in GP. And it can also copy all the tables and views from your GP environment. And essentially what it does is it connects to those smart lists and the tables and views. It'll convert those lists into a CSV file, and then we would dump it into an Azure data lake that you would provision. And then from there, Popdock can connect to that data and present that historical data right inside of Business Central. So I'm going to show you an example of where we've done exactly that. As I mentioned before, we have a couple of, custom groups that we've put into this main extension where we've migrated data from, historical ERPs into a data lake and are now presenting it inside of Business Central. But I'm going to show you an example of a list that we built inside of Popdock. So this is what we call a merge list in Popdock, and it's pretty powerful for those that are, trying to find a solution for their historical data. Essentially what it is a list that we created in Popdock where we've merged together the sales line items list coming from a Dynamics environment, and we've merged it together alongside the sales lines list from this live Business Central environment. Anytime that we're merging two lists together, there will be an additional field within the list called source connector, and it's basically just telling us where these records are coming from. So you'll notice that this whole first page is showing live Business Central data, but if I go over a couple hundred records and scroll down, you'll notice that that is going to change. So what we've done here is we've merged together those two lists from two different environments. We've merged together these Dynamics GP sales line items with the Business Central ones. So this is just one way that we can present your historical data. If you want to present it alongside live Business Central data, that's something that you can set up within Popdock. If you prefer to just having access to your historical GP smart list, that is certainly possible as well. You have kind of the flexibility of how you want to see that right within Business Central. And then just to point out and kind of reiterate my point earlier, from there, this interface is the exact same. So you can then add additional columns, filter on this list, rearrange the order of the fields, export it. That same functionality I showed on that first list would apply here as well. So I'm going to take this example of this list and take it one step further. Within Business Central, there's a lot of flexibility in that we can actually embed a Popdock list on any page inside of your Business Central environment. So what does that look like? I'm going to jump over to a customer card here. And this customer card is for Aaron Fitz Electrical. And if I scroll down on this page, you'll notice I have this additional detail tab that we've embedded where we have another Popdock list. In this case, it's going to be the same type of list that I just showed you, combining historical Dynamics GP sales data alongside live Business Central data. Now, the cool thing about this list is we've actually placed a parameter around it, and it's basically filtering the list to only show us records that are associated with the customer that we're on. If we were to jump over to any other customer card inside of Business Central, this same Popdock widget will be displayed, but again, only showing us records that are associated with that customer. So this is really about bringing that data to the different pages that you might be spending your time in. Now, you also have the flexibility of deciding what type of list you would want displayed here. If you want just live BC data to be displayed on the customer card, we can certainly do that. If you want to show some historical data from a historical ERP, we can do that. Or we can also obviously display, a list where we're combining data from both. And then the other big thing is that same interface would apply, adding columns, filtering. It's going to be the same type of experience no matter where we're displaying a Popdock list. And the other thing I'd like to point out is that we make it feel like you're in Business Central. It doesn't necessarily look based on the theme like an additional application. When we embed Popdock into BC, it's going to go with the theme of Business Central and really look like it's a part of the product, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to jump outside of Business Central here and kind of flip the script a little bit. And I'm going to show you an example where we've actually taken BC data, and we're actually embedding it into another system. So just to show you, I'm just on an account inside of Dynamics CRM. You'll notice that I have this ERP orders tab. And what this list is showing data coming from my ERP of orders that are associated with this customer. So this is just another example of how we can bring data to the systems that your users are spending their time in. You may have a sales team that would, benefit from being able to access your ERP data, but you don't necessarily want them in your accounting system. This is just another way where we can kind of give users access to the data they need to perform their jobs, but also inside of the applications that they are spending their time in. So this is an example of showing ERP data. We also have another one for a help desk solution. In this case, it's Zendesk. And I like showing this list just because there's a couple of things that we've done on this list that allow you to interact with the system that we're accessing this data from. So if I right click on one of these records, you'll notice that I have these actions available. And if I wanted to add a ticket comment to this ticket, what it would do is it would send that update back to the system that we're querying it from. So with some of the systems that we connect to, we have the ability to take action on the data, which just essentially allows them to interact with the system that the data is being queried from. So an example would be updating the status or the priority. I can show you what that would look like. If I wanted to switch the priority to high, and then I refresh my list, you'll notice that that priority changed on that record, which is pretty powerful. One other example, more generic, maybe you want to embed a Popdock list and display it in Microsoft Teams. As you've noticed, as we've jumped between these applications, it's always going to make it feel like you're working with the system that you're working in, and that interface is going to be the same in terms of what users can do with the data. So that's kind of the end result that I wanted to focus on here today. What I'm going to do now is actually jump into our Popdock web application and kind of show you what it looks like behind the scenes when you're setting up a connector and some of the functionality in terms of the different lists that we can create for Business Central. This is our Popdock web application. This first thing I'll point out is that within the web application, there is another interface where you can access any of the lists that would be available to you for people that may not work out of a system. If they would benefit from being able to see some data from Business Central, but don't necessarily spend their time in Business Central, this would be another place where they could access any of those lists. And then again, the same type of thing that I've kind of reiterated, being able to add columns, filter, favorite, all applies here. No matter where we're displaying a Popdock list, that same experience is going to apply. But I'm going to jump into my connectors here. And just to show you really quickly, so we have about 45 pre-built connectors available to you out of the box. We've talked about Business Central here today. You can see that we cover kind of the whole Microsoft Dynamics suite, cover all the ERPs. I briefly mentioned Azure Data Lake, which is just a really cheap storage account for data in the cloud, something that we commonly use when we talk about, being able to access historical data from maybe a GP system. But we aren't just limited to ERPs. We can also connect to CRM systems, help desk solutions, marketing automation platforms. I like to point out two other ones, SQL Server. If you potentially have data sitting on a SQL Server somewhere that you would like to be able to access. We also have this REST service connector. This is just a generic REST connector. So if you do have additional applications that have some sort of REST API that we do not have a pre-built connector for, this REST service connector is a candidate to use in order to be able to connect to that data as well. I am going to go back, however, and I'm going to actually jump into our Business Central connector. So anytime we're connecting to an application so that we can access or query that data, we're setting up a connector inside of Popdock. The big thing that I want to kind of establish or to kind of give a sense of is when you're working inside of one of these connectors, it's extremely flexible and it's really customizable to you as the customer, as the end user. When you're inside of these connectors, you're really ever working with fields that have some sort of cursor over them or drop-down menus. When we get into a connector, I'm going to click on lists. So as I mentioned at the start, we have pre-built about 55 or so lists that we give you access to out of the box that will connect directly to your Business Central environment. Those lists are the ones that you see here. Now, if you want to further customize these lists, you have the ability to drill into any of them. If you wanted to, change the name of the list, if you wanted to change the name of any of the fields or adjust the field types, add calculated fields, all available to you inside of one of these lists that we have pre-built. With Business Central, however, we can add additional lists. So any page within Business Central can actually be published as a web service. So if there are additional pages that you want to bring in as a list into your Popdock environment, just a matter of selecting those, hitting add, and then they would populate into this interface. Query Builder. So this is a big thing if you're coming from, on-premise ERP system. One of the big things when you get to Business Central is you no longer have access to the Business Central tables. So if you're used to maybe working with SQL and writing SQL views, or even used to kind of working with our tool, Smart List Builder, this is really that Smart List Builder type experience for Business Central. And what this essentially allows you to do is write queries at the database level and access the Business Central tables to write those queries, and you don't have to write any AL code to do so. So I'm actually going to drill into one of these queries that we've built, and I'm going to click on Query Builder. So what it is, it's a visual query builder. Within that, you have access to all of the tables within your Business Central environment. So that would include any core tables, it would include any custom extensions, it would include any ISV products that you have purchased. You have access to every single table. Once you've selected a table, you then have access to all of the fields within that table. And you can select which fields you want to bring into your query just by checking a box. As you can see, I've brought in a couple of fields in this example. We can also make this a summary table as well. So if you want any of those fields to be summarized, just check that box and you can select which field you want to be summarized. To take it a step further and to further optimize this query, you can place in a restriction on it. This will filter that query down, and again, we'll just create a more optimized experience when we've published this query. When connecting tables together, you have access to all of the different join types. And the cool thing is, on the background of all this, we are actually writing the AL code for this extension. So we just like to show this. This is something that you guys don't have to write at all. You would just work with a visual builder to build out your query, but on the back end, we are creating all the code for you. And once you've built out this query, you can then hit publish. It's going to publish this query as an extension into your Business Central environment. And then it'll also create a list for you inside of Popdock so that you can then begin using this query right away. One cool thing I like to point out as well is this is really the fastest way of getting at your Business Central data. We are using an API with read-only intent, so there's no really faster way to get access to BC data than by creating these optimized query builder queries. And then the last thing I want to point out is our Business Central connector is this custom list section. So custom list is kind of the tool that we use when we start talking about connecting, potentially disparate systems. You'll notice that we have a couple of different custom list types. The one that I had shown you earlier is called a merge list, where we basically have merged together two lists from two different environments. Just to show you how easy of an exercise it was. When you go into one of these lists, you're basically giving your list a name. You're then selecting what list from what environment you want to merge together. So as I mentioned, when I showed you the list, we merged together the sales line items list coming from a Dynamics E environment, and we've merged it alongside our live Business Central list. And then from there, it's just a matter of kind of doing a mapping of fields. So saying what fields from each of the parent lists we are merging together into our new list. Once you've done kind of the mapping of those fields, this list is immediately available inside of Popdock to use. And then I'll show you here in a second how we would then get it inside of BC. But again, really the big thing I want to highlight is it's really easy to really kind of work with these lists. You're again working with fields with a cursor over them, working with drop-down menus. You're not really having to write any complicated code in order to generate an entirely new list of your data. So the last place that I'm going to kind of take you here today is into the developer section. This is what we use when we talk about embedding that data right inside of BC. So as I mentioned, we have that extension that populates directly from Microsoft's app source into your Business Central environment. And what that is in the background is this multi-list widget. That widget is going to come pre-populated with all of the lists that we have pre-built out of the box. But then from there, if you want to add additional lists from other environments, so maybe you're adding in some historical data, or maybe adding a list from your CRM system. It's super easy to do. You would just hit add list, select what connector you are adding that list from, and then select the list, add it into here, and then it'll be available to use inside of your Business Central environment. Now, I'll kind of give you an example of when we embed it on the customer card, just to show you kind of what that experience looks like. We're building out a new widget. The first step is just giving your widget a name. So I'm going to call it BC Test Customer Card. Next step is just selecting the type. So I showed you earlier a list that's on what's called the Business Central Fast tab. So anytime you want to show kind of that list type format, we would select either the single list or multi-list. We can also show you a card style widget, which I didn't show you here today, but that would be another option that you can actually display inside of Business Central. But here, I'm going to click a single list. I'm then going to select what connector I am picking my list from, and then you're just using these drop-down menus to select which list you want to display. So once you've done that, you would jump over to fields, and you would select what fields you would want to display as your default fields in that list. If you don't select any fields, it's just going to populate the default fields for that list initially. So the next piece is how we get it into Business Central. So with Business Central, as I had mentioned earlier, we can embed a Popdock list on any page inside of Business Central. So you're first going to select your connector, and then you'll notice that all the environments or all the pages within that Business Central environment are going to start loading in here. And once it finishes loading, I'll show you what that looks like. It's going to populate all of the pages, like I said. So there's two different types of widgets, Fast Tab and Fact Box. I showed you the Fast Tab on the customer card. The Fact Box is going to be kind of that right panel on the right side of your pages inside of BC, more designed for like a card style widget. But I'm going to show you here, if I type in customer card, it gives you both options. So the one I had done earlier was the Fast Tab. The last piece of doing this is placing the parameter. So this is how we filter that list down so that it is matching up in this case, the customer number with the customer number on that list. So it filters the list down to only show us records associated with the customer that we would be displaying. Once you've kind of gone through this exercise, this widget, you can actually publish directly into your Business Central environment. You don't need to write any additional code in order to get it over. And then from there, it would show up, and this is kind of what the end result will look like. So that was kind of a deep dive tutorial on a bunch of different things that we can do with Popdock inside of Business Central. Just to kind of recap, I guess the big things that I really want to highlight is really the smart list-like interface. Number one, we've tried to create that smart list, smart view interface to allow you to really easily access data from any of your systems, whether that be Business Central data or data coming from, your historical system or really any other system. That interface is going to be extremely easy to use and really intuitive so that you can ask very easily questions of your data. The next piece is just highlighting the historical data piece. We have the ability to archive all of your historical ERP data coming from a Dynamics G environment, so all of your smart lists, and then also copy the tables and views from that Dynamics database so that you can access that historical data directly inside of Business Central. And then the last piece I really want to focus on is the Query Builder. Now, Query Builder is really unique to Business Central, our Business Central connector, I should say. And if you're used to writing SQL queries or using Smart List Builder, we've kind of created a tool for you to be able to access those Business Central tables and write an optimized query. There's no faster way at getting at your Business Central data. And with that, those were kind of the main things I wanted to focus on.
Thank you so much, you guys. You did a great job presenting, and thank you to everyone for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.